all you lovely kings, queens, and in-betweens, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Elaine, and today I'm going to show you all how to make a killer Aphelia Viper Whisperer Commander deck for roughly $90, with a more budget-friendly $60 or so option at the end of the video. Aphelia, Viper Whisperer, is a Golgari commander. She's a legendary Gorgon assassin who costs 1 black mana and 1 generic mana to cast. She has several abilities, the first of which is deathtouch. Second, whenever she attacks, you may pay a generic mana and a green or a black mana. If you do, create a 1/1 black snake creature token with deathtouch. To utilize her final ability, you would pay 1 black mana and 4 generic mana to grant the following. Until end of turn, whenever 1 or more Gorgons and/or snakes you control deal combat damage to a player, that player loses half their life, rounded up. Given Aphelia's various abilities and the nature of most Magic the Gathering snakes and Gorgons, a deck with Aphelia as its commander has 2 goals. The first is more apparent. Overwhelm your enemies with an army of snakes and Gorgons, using Aphelia's ability to quickly reduce your opponent's life total. The second is less immediately apparent, but becomes more so when you begin to look at the snakes and Gorgons you can include in your deck. Most snakes and Gorgons are death touchers, or creatures you can pay into to grant death touch or easily grant death touch through various means. As a result, adding a secondary win con into your deck becomes simple enough. This secondary win con revolves around infect and poison counters. For those of you who may not know, a player loses the game when they have 10 or more poison counters. More about this later. To help you swiftly overwhelm your enemies, I've included a lot of low-cost creatures. Examples include Ambush Viper, which has Flash and Death Touch. Bloodline Pretender, a changeling, which allows you to choose a creature type as it enters the battlefield. I'd choose snakes with this deck. Whenever another creature you control of the chosen type enters, put a 1/1 counter on Bloodline Pretender, so it's easy for him to build up quickly, especially if you pay into Aphelia's secondary ability periodically. Hagra Constrictor, which enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it and gives each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it menace. This card works nicely with Coiling Stalker, which has ninjutsu, and whenever Coiling Stalker deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control that doesn't have a +1/+1 counter on it. This allows you to quickly build up a pile of creatures with menace, making it harder for enemies to block you, which is what you ultimately want so you can make the most of Aphelia's abilities in your alternate win condition. Hex Drinker, which you can level up as a sorcery to grant various abilities. Hooded Blightfang, a death toucher with whenever a creature you control with death touch attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life, allowing you to whittle away at enemy health while gaining health with all the death touchers you have in deck. And whenever a creature you control with death touch deals damage to a planeswalker, destroy that planeswalker, making it easy to remove enemy planeswalkers before they have the chance to ult. Mold Adder, which makes it so whenever an opponent casts a blue or black spell, you may put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, making it really easy to build this bad boy up in a pod so you can move in for an easy kill. Moss Viper, a 1-drop with death touch. Narnum Cobra, a 2-drop you can grant death touch by paying a green mana. Orochi Merge Keeper, a snake who happens to be a mana dork, because you can never have enough mana. Farika's Chosen, another 1-drop with death touch. One of my favorites, Prowling Serpapard, which can't be countered and makes it so creature spells you control can't be countered, making it a bit harder for your enemies to get a handle on your board state. Scourge of the Undercity, who has lifelink and who upon entering the battlefield gives another target creature you control lifelink until end of turn, so you can gain a little bit of health. I think you get the idea. In addition to overwhelming your opponents with a massive board state by quickly playing lots of inexpensive creatures, perhaps more importantly, I've included a lot of death touchers, which your opponents are probably not too inclined to block with their big, mean beastie boys and cool creatures, and cards that cannot be blocked to play into Aphelia's final ability, which allows you to pay 1 black mana and 4 generic mana to grant the following. Until end of turn, whenever 1 or more Gorgons and/or snakes you control deal combat damage to a player, that player loses half of their life, rounded up, and your deck's alternate win con, poison counters. This is important because you want your snakes and other beasties to get through your enemy's defenses so you can either A. murder them with excessive damage or B. murder them with poison counters. There are several creatures that help you accomplish this feat. I'm going to focus on those that are easier to break through enemy defenses first before changing gears to explain how this helps with your secondary win con. The first creature I've included that's easy to break through certain enemy defenses is Anaconda, which has Swamp Walk. This prevents a creature from being blocked if the defending player controls a swamp. Mire Boa is similar, although it can be regenerated if you pay into it. River Boa has Island Walk and can be regenerated. Now, I'm going to switch gears and discuss the creatures that heavily support this deck winning via its alternate means, poison counters. The first is Archetype of Finality, which makes it so creatures you control have Death Touch, and creatures your opponents control lose Death Touch and can't have or gain Death Touch. The second is Aphelia de Grand Pré, a Death Toucher who makes it so whenever a creature you control with Death Touch deals combat damage to a player, you put that many +1/+1 counters on that creature. This synergizes with Hagra Constrictor nicely, giving these unblocked creatures counters and then menace, which makes them even harder to block going forward. It also makes your creature stronger, adding to their threat level. The next is Sarith, the Viper's Fang, which gives other tapped creatures you control Death Touch, other untapped creatures you control Hexproof, and has a paid tap ability, which allows you to untap another target creature or land you control. The most important of these abilities is arguably her first, which gives other tapped creatures you control Death Touch, meaning that anything you've tapped to attack will have Death Touch. This is important because it synergizes with the king of this foul plan, Finn the Fangbearer, a Death Toucher who makes it so whenever a creature you control with Death Touch deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters. This is key because it means you can knock a player out with 5 hits. Something that shouldn't be too difficult given the fact that many, if not all of your creatures will have Death Touch, may have Menace, making them even harder to block, because you can build up your board state with inexpensive creatures and Aphelia's secondary ability to help overwhelm your opponents, because you will have various walkers in your deck that the enemy may not be able to block at all, and because of cards like Rogue's Passage, which you can pay into to make a creature unblockable for a single turn. The best defense is player removal, after all. There are several non-creature cards which play into this deck's goals. The first is Vraska, Golgari Queen, a planeswalker whose ult is you get an emblem with. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game, which further reduces the amount of effort you have to put into removing an opponent from the game. Coiling Rebirth, a sorcery, allows you to return a creature from the graveyard to the battlefield, allowing you to regain control of one of your deck's key components if it had been previously removed. Even though you won't get to make that sweet token, I would suggest waiting to use it on a card like Finn because of his massive role in the deck's poison counter strategy. Feed the Swarm provides some removal for pesky enemy cards, while Night's Whisper may help you draw into that card you've been looking for. The instants I've included in this deck are designed to keep your enemy's boards in check, especially if you need a little support on the field, and to play into the poison counter win con. The first is Bite Down, which causes a creature you control to deal damage equal to its power to a creature or planeswalker you don't control. This is more beneficial when you've beefed up your beasties a little bit, but can be used to remove a creature or planeswalker that's been getting in the way and causing trouble. Coat with Venom buffs a creature a bit and grants it Death Touch, making it easier to remove a pesky piece that's moving against your ranks. Gift of the Viper is similar, although it also grants reach and allows you to untap the creature it targets, allowing you to bring one of your creatures back into the fray to eliminate a target you simply can't allow to get through. Killing Glare is a removal piece with potential limited only by your mana reserves, while Snakeskin Veil can be used to protect somebody you really don't want to die right now. Vraska's Fall causes each opponent to sacrifice a creature or planeswalker of their choice and gain a poison counter, combining removal with the progression toward your secondary win condition. There aren't many artifacts in the deck, and half of them are Commander staples. Commander Sphere ensures you have access to each color you need. Lightning Greaves creates a Hasty Boy with some added protection. Soul Ring is your standard mana rock, and Swiftfoot Boots creates a Hasty Fellow with some extra protection, perfect for a key card like Aphelia or Finn. The other artifacts I included are Gorgon Flail, which gives the creature it is equipped to +1/+1 and Death Touch, beefing them up a little and deterring folks from blocking it. Instruments of War makes your snakes, always choose snakes, a bit stronger, while Ronus's Monument makes green creature spells even cheaper. It makes it so whenever you cast a creature spell, target creature you control gets +2/+2 and gains trample until end of turn. The wording ensures that its ability can be used whenever you cast a creature, even if it isn't green, and that its ability doesn't have to be used upon the creature you just cast, so you actually get to make use of the buff and trample more often than not. Both are great, but trample is really helpful because it makes it just a bit easier to deal damage to an opponent, playing into abilities of cards such as Aphelia and Finn. There are only 3 enchantments in the deck. The first is a Saga, Tales of Master Shishiro, which allows you to beef up a creature, playing into Hagra Constrictor's ability, and grant something Vigilance, ensuring you always have at least one blocker after an attack. Its transformed form is a 5/5 with Vigilance and Haste, adding to your board state and ensuring you can attack. immediately. Underworld Dreams is simply a great way of whittling away at opponent's health because they're always going to be drawing cards at least at the start of their turn. And the enchantment makes it so whenever an opponent draws a card, Underworld Dreams deals 1 damage to that player. The last is one of my favorite enchantments of all time, Wound Reflection. This wicked enchantment makes it so at the beginning of each end step, each opponent loses life equal to the life they lost this turn. Since it's any life they lost, not only the life you dealt them, it makes it even easier to take opponents out because they not only need to consider the effects of their own cards, but damage dealt to them by others. In many ways, it puts them in a bind. It makes it easier to take them out because both you and your opponents can work together to swiftly eliminate a threat. Finally, I'm going to briefly talk about lands. I've included a standard 37. They're a classic blend of basics and staples like Command Tower to make sure you have access to each of the 2 colors you need to play this deck optimally. I've also included 3 Tree City in my deck for 2 reasons. 1. I drew it and it's a great land. 2. I'm playing a largely snake tribal deck, and 3 Tree City's final paid ability lets you choose a color and add an amount of mana of that color equal to the number of creatures you control of the chosen type. Since I'll typically have a lot of snakes on the field, this card is helpful to have because it ensures I have a lot of mana to use for various means. Sakiko, Mother of Summer, although a creature and not a land, is also helpful in building up mana in this way because she makes it so whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, add that much green. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. Since you're bound to be unblocked at least some of the time, you can use 3 Tree City in conjunction with Sakiko to build up your mana pool and play more than your opponents to take them out quickly. To reduce the cost of this deck by roughly a third, making its total cost roughly $60 as opposed to $90, take out 3 Tree City. The deck will still function wonderfully without it, but it's an added treat to make the deck even more powerful if you have the budget for it. And there you have it, my deck tech for Aphelia Viper Whisperer. What did you think of my deck tech? Did you like having 2 different budget options? Do you want to check this assassin out? How do you feel about Death Touchers, Poison Counters, Alternate Win Cons, Gorgons, and Snake Tribal? Let me know down below in the comments. I always like to know what you kings, queens, and in-betweens think. A full deck list will also be posted down below in the description for your convenience and perusal. And if you like what you saw here today, please smash that like button until it's blue, subscribe, ring that bell so you'll always know what's up, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye guys!
Hi, Tisha Valenza, aka Poison Ivy, and you've just been watching King's Entertainment Reviews. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and watch.